Hi, my name is Angela Kovach. I'm the head of public sector at ZL Technologies. I joined the company about 4 months ago. I have a background as an attorney and a global defense security and contractor. I'm based out of Washington, D.C., and I'm excited to talk to you a little bit about what we're doing at ZL Technologies in the federal space today. If we're talking about unstructured data, the first thing that we probably want to do is say, what is unstructured data? And unstructured data is human-generated data, emails, chats, all of the conversations and communications that contain the nuance and secret sauce of what's happening in agencies. And so if you think about that information, the first step is to imagine, where do all of those conversations and communications take place? Is that in email? Is that in chat? Is that in various other kinds of management systems at your organization? First, map that out. Then think about where you want this data to go. What is the application that you want to use to harness the information in this data? Is it an LLM model that helps you drive operational efficiency? That would determine what types of information you need to be looking at to feed the model. So it's both understanding what that data is, thinking about where the data lives, and then thinking about the ultimate purpose of the data that will help you start to roadmap your unstructured data plan. AI just really started to be talked about in the federal space in the last, I'd say, year and a half, when we started to see the introduction of ChatGPT. Since then, it's caught fire, and a lot of federal agencies are talking about the art of the possible of AI in the federal space. I don't know that it's completely solidified in terms of what that looks like in practical use. I know that a lot of different agencies have rolled out support chatbots, both internal and customer, or I'd say, populace-facing chatbots. Beyond that, I'm not really seeing a generalized application of AI in a at least civilian capacity yet. So something a lot of agencies aren't thinking about is the fact that 80 to 90% of the data at their agency is unstructured. And so many agencies will say, hey, we're thinking about data management, we're thinking about what we do for data in AI, but what they're really thinking about is only 10 to 20% of their structured data, data that lives in databases and Excel spreadsheets. And if you think about that, that's really not the key and informative information at that agency. And so we have this immense treasure trove of information sitting at federal agencies that is being completely ignored. And that information is only exponentially increasing as we think about the explosion of chat technology, email technology, all other types of conversations that are happening beyond the standard sort of correspondence that we saw in the past. If we leave that information unaddressed, you are not tapping into the sort of intellectual brain of your agency. Imagine what you could glean from all of that information if you harnessed it appropriately. And so it becomes even more critical as we continue to communicate in new and different ways to think about how we are harnessing the intelligence contained within those communications. The ways that agencies think about using AI changes as their AI posture matures. So in the first sort of initial phase of AI application at agencies, many of them are just thinking about efficiencies, how they can measure performance, how they can look at their funding spend, things that are really sort of administrative or operational. As they become familiar with AI and they start tapping into the power of the unstructured data, they can actually become incredibly strategic. It becomes mission focused. And as we all know, the best thing that you want to do is support the mission in a federal agency. And so suddenly you can start thinking about not just how a soldier is performing, but also what happens on the battlefield. He's taking in tactical information in his body cam, on his flyweight computer. All of that information now can be used to create advanced battlefield strategies. At the IRS, they could be thinking about future regulations that can help monitor taxpayer fraud before it even happens. And so we really step beyond just the sort of administrative office function of an agency and think about how we make that agency work better for the humans that they're supposed to serve. All right, when we're talking about what goes into an LLM, what we don't think about often is the input. Everyone talks about the output of a generative AI model. What are you getting from it? But you have to feed it to get that information. Many of the models that we think about today, ChatGPT and other popular models, are trained off of massive data sets of public information, social media data, things that are out on the internet. And so then you can imagine you get very generalized output. It's also not necessarily targeted or accurate output. You have to validate the output of a lot of these models. And so when a federal agency is thinking about implementing a generative AI model, it becomes critical for them to think about the types of data that are being fed into that model, because that's going to ensure that the results that are generated from the model are more accurate, are focused towards the mission of that agency, reflect the tone and values of that agency. And so if we step back and think about that a little bit more, you can imagine that if you are a regulatory agency and you are feeding outdated policies or outdated information into that model may hallucinate. It may provide you with inaccurate results. And so it really becomes a sort of garbage in, garbage out model. You have to imagine you've got to feed it accurate information to produce those accurate results as a federal agency. So that's why it's so important to think about the types of data going into your LLM models at a federal agency. A lot of what we talk about when we talk about generative AI is big picture. We're thinking about the full focus of a federal agency, but oftentimes AI can have a simple but effective application. Let's imagine the ways that AI could enhance your records keeping practices at your agency. AI can be used to help you automatically categorize the data that you have at your agency. It can help you identify those data sources and the types of information and themes in there. And then when you go for a legal hold or for e-discovery purposes or for FOIA, that information is easily retrieved, automatically categorized, and it also helps eliminate the human error that can come from multiple humans with different missions looking at data. You can really standardize across a data set using AI. When we're talking about federal agencies, we are often keeping information siloed on purpose. Many people in the federal space have heard the term need to know over and over again. That means that certain people are denied access to information for national security purposes. When we start thinking about a centralized archive, what you are doing is taking information out of its protective privacy or compliance silo and putting it into one centralized location. You're no longer honoring those sort of parameters that defined where it lived before. This also means that you've got a copy of sensitive information, and so if there were ever a reason to delete that, you have to go to multiple locations to delete the copy. And so there are a lot of reasons that this is probably not the best practice within a sensitive security environment like the federal agency. Our approach is to think about leaving the data where it lies, honoring the security parameters that were originally intended for that information. And therefore, you can just use an API or a connector into those data sources to extract the intelligence from those documents. What you're really looking for is not necessarily a copy of a document, but the information that that document contains, those valuable nuggets and kernels of discussion and talking points contained within the four corners of a document. So we don't need to make a copy of everything to extract that information. However, sometimes a hybrid approach is valuable, and so when there is a need to produce a document for FOIA, to produce a document pursuant to an investigation or litigation, we also have the ability to make that copy in a limited situation. So you have the benefit of both solutions. You have a copy when you need one, but you can leave the data in its secure, originally intended environment beyond that, and we think that's the best approach. I think the biggest thing that I'm hearing consistently since entering into this space is that we have got to get the records managers at the table with the chief data officers, with the chief innovation officers, and now with the chief AI officers. Everyone needs to be working together. What we saw traditionally was that records was treated as an administrative function, almost a throwaway. Let's just be compliant with the NARA regulations and we don't need to think about it beyond that. Now, when we think of all of these applications for this data, it becomes critical that the people that know how to govern this data and where this data live are sitting and having discussions with the people thinking about how to utilize this data in new and strategic ways. And so I really think that that is the future of information governance, is those records keepers and those librarians and the people that know all about the data are now sitting at the table with the people thinking about advanced technology.